Paint splatters on screen revealing a series of images, a woman playing violin, then in a bright pink costume, then in a blind skier penny atop a mountain. The paint drip splatters revealing text in print and braille. Unsightly Opinions.
Hi, welcome to Unsightly Opinions. My name's Tamara. Today I want to talk all about color and my perception of color as a blind person. It can be an incredibly difficult topic to try and broach when you aren't seeing the same as the person that's trying to describe it to you. So today I want to talk about my personal experience with color. I want to talk about how I group and match and think about color and some of the other ways you can describe color if the person that you're talking with either doesn't have a perception of color, never has, or has lost that same visual ability that you have. As always, my interpretation and my love of color is not necessarily going to be shared by all other blind people. Many people who are blind or low vision don't care about color, don't think it's important, it doesn't matter to them. So trying to describe things or trying to give extra descriptor words when it comes to color is not going to be helpful, useful, or even wanted. So always be sure to ask if somebody would like extra descriptions or extra assistance matching or determining color. But I'm hoping that this video can give you some tools if somebody is asking for that extra assistance to understand the colors that they have in front of them. With all that out of the way, let's dive in. I think I have a fairly good understanding of what color looks like, even though I don't see a lot of color anymore. When I was younger, I could identify blue from green from red. I could typically pick out every color in a rainbow. So from that perspective, I think I had a really good perception of color. On a physiological level, as someone with albinism, I understand that I was born with less rods and less cones. So my ability to differentiate color or my ability to see subtle variations in color was probably never normal. It's difficult for me to know what I was missing out on because I've never had that perception. At this point, I don't really think in color anymore. There are certain colors that I think I still know what they look like, and that's because I see them every single day. It's the blue and purple splotches that I constantly see as part of my Charles Bonnet syndrome that are constantly floating in front of my eyes and flashing and weaving. So I think I still see that in terms of color, but I may be wrong. They may be completely different colors than what you might see. When I think about colors, I don't have a lot of visual memory anymore, so I tend to associate color with temperature because that makes the most sense to me, and I know it's a common interior design trick. If you saw my video talking about how I've made my house accessible, I talked a little bit about how I group colors in that video. I like to think of colors almost on a heat spectrum. So your cold colors are going to be your greens, your blues, and your purples, and your warm colors are usually going to be your pinks, reds, oranges, and yellows. And then you can put all of the other miscellaneous colors either in the middle, neutral, or it leans towards one of the temperature poles. So I would consider brown warm, I would consider gray cool, I would consider cream warm, I would consider white cool. But when it comes to words beyond red, green, yellow, blue, violet, I tend to mix them up, confuse them, and I may not get it right 100% of the time because I don't have that visual reference to keep reinforcing what those words mean. So something like chartreuse, I know I've read the definition 100 times, I can't tell you what color that is. I know it is a color, but I don't know if it's a yellow color, a red color, a green color, a blue color. I have no idea. Things like topaz or aquamarine, I consider those to be the same color, even though they probably have subtle variations in the real world. So when I'm thinking about something, I either think it in terms of pastel or light, medium, fluorescent, which is like illuminated bright, and navy. And yes, I know there is no navy red, it would probably be something closer to a burgundy, but that's how I kind of grade it in my head from the most white to the most black in the color. So something like blue, you'd have your lightest blue would be something like a sky blue, and then maybe you'd have a water blue, although I've never seen water as blue, so I'm not sure about that one. And then you have a electric blue, like the color of my top right now. And then you'd have navy blue below that. So the lightest blue would have the most white in it, and the darkest color would have the most black in it, almost like a color slider. And that's how I typically group most colors. So I almost think about it in terms of a graph or a spreadsheet almost, where you have the amount of white or the amount of dark from top to bottom, and then you have the warmness or coolness from left to right. And that may not make any sense to you, but it works for me in my head. And that may not be how any other blind person thinks about it, because I've tried to talk about colors with other blind folks or other folks that can't see color, and we all have different interpretations of what each color is and how it fits on that spectrum, and it can be difficult to know that what I think is right is actually right, so I just do the best that I can. When it comes to matching things, I typically try and simplify what I'm trying to match. If there's any way that I don't have to think about details, then that's usually the way I'm going to go. If you see me in a pair of pants, they're probably going to be black or jeans, because I know that works with every single top color I have, from white to blue to green to orange to black. And simplifying that down so I don't have to think about, does this brown pair of slacks work with this X, Y, or Z top? It makes my life a lot simpler. So keeping those colors neutral and not having to constantly remember what every single thing is simplifies things for me. It's very rare that I will reach for a bright colored pant. I do have a couple. I think I have one pair of khaki green pants, one pair of brown pants, one pair of peach pants, and a pair of gray pants. But that's it when it comes to color in my wardrobe. I try and stick with neutrals as much as possible, because it can get incredibly frustrating when you want to dress yourself independently and you don't know what goes together. So rather than make mistakes that I might personally find embarrassing, which I have made quite a number of in the past, trying to dress myself appropriately, one particular situation comes to mind when I was surprised at the door and I had to get dressed very quickly, and I ended up putting on a pair of brown pants with a green top and a pink poncho. The poncho was not the fashion faux pas. I know that's not a thing now, but in the early 2000s, that was absolutely in style. So don't come at me for the poncho, but it was not a good look, and I still cringe when I think about putting that outfit together, because I was genuinely trying, but I really missed the mark because I didn't have the skills I have now to think about color in the analytical way that I do. So whenever I'm trying to match something, I try and put a color with a neutral, because if you start talking about contrasting color theory of, oh, well, green and red are on the opposite sides of the color wheel so they go well together, or yellow and purple, it makes less than no sense to me, and I have no visual understanding of what that looks like. So trying to put those contrasting tones together is not something that works for me in my head, so I just avoid thinking about it altogether. If something like that needs to happen, I always go to somebody else who can see, who I trust their judgment when it comes to matching, to make that decision for me. So depending on the situation, it might be a friend, it might be Robbie, it might be my dad, it might be my sister, and if all of those fail, I can always use something like a color detector or Be My Eyes. I find color detection apps to be really problematic, and maybe that's because I don't use them properly, but I have never found them to be accurate, especially the one in Microsoft Seeing AI. You probably heard me talk about that a few weeks ago, and how I don't typically rely on a color detector because I don't trust them. So I will always go to that human element, because while I'll trust Microsoft Seeing AI for all kinds of text-based or audio-based cues, I won't trust it for those visual cues when it comes to matching, because I know that it's not as accurate as I'd like it to be, and those kinds of decisions I feel are very important. It may surprise you to know that I absolutely adore color, even though I can't see it. It makes me feel things, and aside from associating it on a color spectrum, each color really really evokes an emotional feeling for me. So I try and associate each color with what it makes me feel and the energy it gives off. And that might sound a little bit hokey, but that's one of the things that I really enjoy playing with, especially when it comes to my wardrobe or the decor around my house, is how does it make me feel just thinking about that color? And it's a very tactile experience for me. It's a very sensory experience for me because those are the things that I can really relate to. So something like this electric blue top that I've got on really makes me feel vibrant and energetic. So those electric shades have a lot of energy to them. It's just like the electric blobs that I see behind my eyes all the time. It's very energetic. Something like green feels very relaxing to me. It feels very lush, very organic. Something like red feels very energetic, very spicy, very fiery. So I typically will also associate colors with those sensations, and I don't necessarily dress myself given the sensation that I want to evoke that day, but having that emotional association with each color helps me, again, to put it into terms that I can understand. So one of the things you might want to consider when you're talking to somebody about colors, or when you're thinking about colors in a way that somebody who doesn't have vision can understand, try and relate it to a sensory experience. Try and relate it to an emotional experience. Try and relate it to something that you can touch, feel, or experience. So if you were trying to describe brown, describe it as the feeling of dirt or the taste of chocolate. Those are two brown things, but it can create an emotional experience or emotional connection to each one of those colors. And there's a fantastic book, which I wish I had a copy of, called The Big Black Book of Color, which talks about all kinds of different ways you can describe color to somebody who can't see it, and relates it to those emotional or tactile or sensory experiences in a way that would make sense to somebody who can't see color. So next time you're working with somebody who maybe can't see color, ask them what works best for them in terms of describing the color. Would they like just a straight up description of red, orange, yellow, green, or light blue, dark blue? Stick to general color descriptors because that's going to be easier to understand and categorize than using really accurate color terms that make sense to you, but certainly don't make sense to me and probably don't make sense to the person that you're working with. Although you can ask them what their preference is. Some people may want to know if it's fuchsia versus maroon versus burgundy, whereas for me, just tell me it's a light burgundy or it's a bright red. That's all I want. And then you can also ask that person if they want an association with something that they're familiar with or a tactile experience. So if you're trying to tell me something, I'm okay if you just tell me it's brown or orange or red, but it's going to evoke more emotion for me. It's going to make me feel something. If you do consider using terms like it's orange and it's warm like fire, or it's baby blue and it's cool like ice, that's going to relate it to something that I can experience and feel included in what you're trying to describe. But again, these are my interpretations, so I'm genuinely curious about how you think about color down below. If you have some color deficits, what makes it easier for you to understand what somebody is talking about? How do you match things? How do you try and maintain an understanding of color, or does it not matter at all? I'd love to hear your thoughts, but that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far, please consider supporting the channel by liking, commenting, subscribing, engaging down below, or on any of my other social media platforms. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.